Hi there. I'm so glad that you're joining us this week for Happy Half Hour. I love doing that. Those are precious artifact of the NBC chimes, one of the original set of NBC chimes, one of the great things we have at the Museum of Broadcast Communication. And I'm so excited to tell you that, we haven't been open regularly, but we are going to be open on October 30th and 31st. We know that there are way too many Svengoolie fans out there in the Halloween time, and you'll want to get into the museum and see that exhibit, see your old friend, see Sven, see what he's up to, visit a rubber chicken or two. So please join us. We are only allowing a small amount. The city has gone back down, so there's only about 6 people a session that can come in an hour. But please sign up, buy your tickets online, make sure to wear a mask. We want you to be safe. And we're even going to figure out how to get you some Halloween treats, I'll tell you. So if you're not into Halloween, then I think that what I want to make sure that you know is we are also seasonal with one of our online exhibits called greatdebates.org. And greatdebates.org really looks at, if you've been on this space before, that we push this because it's very important, broadcasting and the presidential debates. As we are closing in on the election day, the end of election season, we know that this is going to be something that is interesting to people and that they care about. We've gone through these debates, and we're going to talk about the debates today. But I do promise you, too, that we are updating this in real time so that you, either as an educator, as a parent, can talk to your students and children about this, or if you're a lifelong learner, there's so much on there that you can see and that you can analyze and that help you figure out how important the broadcast world is when it comes to what it's done in the political atmosphere. And I will tell you that as we move along, we're going to take this exhibit and we're going to keep this exhibit up through till the inaugural. And we are also going to try to make sure that we morph it so that we talk about the broadcast world and its effect on the whole presidency. So, and today we have a dear old friend here to talk with us, Al Gini. Al Gini, how are you?
I'm better than I deserve. Thank you for having me back.
Well, we are
It's an
glad.
old Jesuit saying that pretends that you are really modest. I'm not, but I am glad to be here. And at my age, I'm glad to be anywhere. But that's a show for another time.
Well, we consider you our political pundit. We are so grateful to you, author, scholar, and also just an all-around fun guy who you make history fun. You make history fun. You have wonderful stories. And I can't help but keep going back to you.
You're very kind. If you don't laugh at history, you're not going to have much to laugh at all. And boy, is there a lot to laugh at in history.
Lordy, 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 lordy. So let's jump in right away
Yeah,
to the history
you
that just
bet.
happened, which is that last 2020 political debate for presidential candidates, the two of
Yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Tell me what you thought.
Well, in point of fact, it was a debate, or for most of it, it was a debate. They actually exchanged ideas. There was point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint. And although a
Mhm.
number of the questions for both of the candidates they both devolved into stump speeches, they were actually speaking to each other for a long period of time. Certainly there was civility. Certainly Mr. Trump was in control. He was not the bull in a china shop in any way. And if anybody was in control, it was Mr. Biden, who seemed to be wanted to be absolutely correct in every word that he said, so that he didn't seem to be angry or snarly or so on and so forth. And part of that was certainly the last debate. And Mr. Trump, if nothing else, is a media maven who pays attention to what the media has to say and responds to it, and every time he can. The moderator did a wonderful job. First of all, I was incredibly impressed by the quality and depth of her questions, and for the most part, she controlled both of them. A couple of times she lost it, but she did control both of them. And I want to say, having said that, I want to give a little bit of a shout out to Chris Wallace. That was the first debate. How do you tell, even though you're the head of Fox News and a major reporter with serious credentials, after all, who was his father? The man who helped create, the Sunday night news program, which is the news program in the world. How do you say to a president, shut up? How do you derail a politician from giving his pieces.
I'm gonna totally push back on that because whereas I think that he's Chris Wallace is amazing and try to do the best. uh, I think he should have known. He has interviewed the president a number of times. He knows that the president was an interrupter. I think the last debate
Yeah,
that we saw was just really totally out of character for the
right.
president. The fact that he did adhere to the rules, the fact that that he did remain silent is not at all what we have seen from him before. So for Chris
Absolutely not.
on this and not, how do you say that to him? You already know that if you consider that your audience is the most important thing in that room, right? That
Yes,
they
you're
get
right.
information about these two people, then you have to say, you know, I can't believe that they didn't come up with the we're going to shut off the mic thing earlier. I know that the
And it
candidate
didn't.
on
Yeah,
it.
and it didn't quite work. It didn't quite. Now wait. Now, let's be fair here. I'm giving Chris Wallace a C minus rather than an F.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
not giving him an A for what he did. And the reality is, when he interviewed the
What are you giving
president
Christian
a
Walker? What are you
few weeks
giving
before
Christian?
that, pardon,
I said, what are you giving Christine Walker from NBC, the one who the woman who conducted the last interview?
with him, oh, I thought she deserved at least a B or a B plus. She tried. Now she gave up because after a while, it is still the president of the United States. You don't say to the president of the United States, "Excuse me, sir, you're just lying." This is impossible for us to believe that you really mean that. This is beyond conscionable information. You can't say that. The rules of decorum don't allow it. This is not,
Mm.
the bully pulpit still allows for some braggadocio. Well, that was a good alliteration. Mark that one down. We'll come back to that. But it does allow for a lot of braggadocio. And so I think these are new waters. And so I think that Chris Wallace was flummoxed when he interviewed Trump alone, and then he was flummoxed there, thinking he'd be more modulated, but he wasn't. I'm not giving him a free skate. I'm just suggesting, even though this woman was trying to be very point on, she couldn't control them, either one of them, at one point along the way.
So I want to go back to something which I think is really interesting. There
Yeah,
was a whole kerfuffle about the second debate, which of course didn't happen because it turned into two separate town halls because
yeah.
President Trump said, "Hey, I'm not going to do remote stuff." And I just want to bring up a moment in history. Actually, the third debate between Kennedy and Nixon was a
Yeah,
remote debate. Both of the
right.
candidates were on the opposite side of the country, and they continued to have that debate back and forth, and it worked out for the most part pretty seamlessly. So there's a lot of precedent for that stuff, and the idea that this is not how we do it just doesn't fit into reality. We do it that way a lot.
Well, remember, but you have to look at the president's style. The president is a product. I mean, the president that we know now, not the president, not Donald Trump before 1985, perhaps.
Hmm.
The president we know now is a product of television, is a product of the media, and he knows how to play it. He's brilliant at that. Give the devil his due. The man knows there's not a camera he doesn't like or can't speak to. And I think that he needed the environment. He needed the stimuli of the engagement to fight back because he's a dirty fighter. Forgive me, I don't want to put New York down, but you think it was a New York street fighter. That's what he is. He keeps referring to himself as that, and that's what he is. And remember, his basic message is a simple one: vote for me because I'm me. That's been his entire campaign, even in this last debate. When push came to shove when it came to planning, when it came to the infrastructure, when it came to medical planning, he kept saying, "Oh, I've got plans. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that." Wait, you've been in office almost 4 years. Not one serious medical program have you set forward, or proposition have set forward. Not one idea about rebuilding the infrastructure as FDR did. FDR's genius and Hitler's genius is because they started building roads in the middle of a depression. Now, having said that, he may have mismanaged COVID, but he's right on one thing. He didn't cause COVID, and you can't lay that one on me.
Right. And I do think that as you're looking at this and you're talking about, again, Donald Trump as the president, reality TV star turned politician, there's no way around it that he is masterful at this medium. He really
Absolutely.
understands and say something, people don't cut you off. In most of the people don't cut you off. He's
Right.
busy cutting people off, but you say it, people don't interrupt you, people have respect for this, and he makes these flat statements that he says are, are the truth, even though they are not, and they're disputed factually, and they're clearly disputed factually, but still that
Yeah.
image of statement is on that moment in the camera. And so what people who believe him, what people who are voting for him, his the people who back him see is somebody who is actually acting presidential if you take away the
Yeah.
truth factor. So it is,
Well, and not
and
acting presidential. I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I'm not sure he's acting presidential. These are the people who want him to not be the standard politician. If you've been listening to some of the interviews of his base, and I'm not demeaning his base, but one of the common elements comes out of it, well, he's not just another politician. That's the reason lots of Democrats and lots of independents voted from last time. Well, the professional Democrats, excuse me, professional politicians have always been in control here. They haven't done so well. Let's try something else. Okay, we did. But the
Right.
reality is his appeal is that he's supposedly an incredibly successful entrepreneur.
Well, and despite all of the things that the New York Times has put out about his money and his taxes and everything else, you could argue that he is still quite successful. He managed to be the president of the United States. And that is my point, that he is the president that the
Yeah,
voting bloc that voted for him wanted him to be,
yeah,
not that normal, not what we have come to expect in the presidency. And I have to do say
absolutely.
there's not a normal when it comes to the presidency, and the way we quote unquote normalize politicians is it's just a flat statement that we use all the time. There
Yeah,
isn't really a way to measure normal because that
right.
office is shaped by the person who's in it. But he is the man that he said he would be, that he would be different from the rest, and he is still
Absolutely.
appealing out through this. So there's a couple of different wonderful books about this, that I just love, and I'm going to have to. I'm reaching over here to the library. I didn't have it out,
I got
but
it.
this audience of one,
Yes,
audience of one. You read this book? It's just wonderful. Donald Trump, Television and the Fracturing of America. It's by the New York Times critic there, and
right.
it's fascinating how the way he puts it is that here was this man born at this distinct time. The timing on it was amazing, and he utilized all of television and
He,
all the
he
idea of media. Go
right. I
ahead.
want to
Go ahead.
put together 2 points here, 3 points. You're
Okay.
right. He has embraced the modern media and it is made for him. He knows as a salesman that you got to get your face in front of somebody, that you got to get your message in front of somebody. And if you keep talking hard enough and long enough, maybe they believe it in the long run. I'm sorry for this. This is the professor grandfather doing. I beg your pardon. The reality is he has mastered that. He's understood the importance of that media. He's understood that he made more money on television than he was making on his buildings there for a while, or that money on television was stimulating the buildings. He had credibility, he had cachet, he had credit because of that. So I want to suggest he really did. So that's the modern. The old philosophy that he brings in there, and I've mentioned this before, and I'm going to be very careful, are the lessons of propaganda, the lessons taught by Joseph Goebbels. I am not associating Mr. Trump with Nazism or Goebbels directly. But the reality is that a message, whether true or false, told long enough and regularly enough becomes the truth. And from his august position as the President of the United States, he's able to say things like, I was better to African Americans than Abraham Lincoln. Excuse me? What could that possibly mean? Any fact check at all proves that. Have you forgotten Lyndon Baines Johnson? Have you forgotten all sorts of other things along the way? But simply saying, Joe, you've got money in China. What money in China? You've got a bank account in China. He has a bank account in China. Joe doesn't have a bank account in China. But just saying it from that position, from that office, gives him credibility, at least with his base. Not on CNN, not on CNBC, but to his base. And if you could reinforce the base and get 12% of 12% of either the non-committed or Democrats to vote for him, he wins the presidency. And so this is not over yet, Susan. We may be having an absolute, let's fall on our swords as soon as this interview is over in a couple of weeks. But let's see. And the other thing I want to point out is that Trump, in a very real sense, I think unbeknownst to himself, except he understands the Gemeinschaft. I don't think he could spell Gemeinschaft, either can I, but of the society
I
right
don't know
now.
if I
And
can
it, yeah, and maybe Biden can. That I want to quote a book, not this new book. I want to quote Arthur Schlesinger in the Imperial Presidency. In a very real sense, although Schlesinger is a critic of Nixon, he's saying that Nixon is the apotheosis of the modern presidency, that you need power. That Nixon was doing exactly what Lincoln was doing, he was taking as much power as he could to affect change, to live out his presidency in the way he thought perfect. He exceeded the bounds of the Constitution and good taste, et cetera, et cetera. But the job of the modern president is to get power, hold on to power, and use power. Trump gets that, and he's doing that.
So let's talk about how in the broadcast world, the media are covering this. And when we talk about the broadcast world at the museum, we definitely mean radio, television, and digital, which basically
Yeah,
means every newspaper in the country these days, because
yeah, yeah, yeah.
every, so we had learned some lessons in 2016, and in
Right.
fact, with the polls, what I find is, again, there's a drumbeat about the polls, about the polls, about the polls, even though it feels as though, wait a minute, we were there in 2016 quoting the polls, and that wasn't exactly accurate, but we're back there. And also the
Yeah.
other issue afterwards, the media, when they came together to discuss what they missed and how they did it, they said, well, we were guilty of putting Donald Trump and his rallies on television way too much because they garnered great ratings. So, maybe we won't do that again. How do you think they have morphed in this election
Yeah.
as
Yeah. Yeah. You have to promise me we're going to come back to make a couple comments about Mr. Biden. But
okay,
this is
okay.
journalism 101. When's the last time the front page of the Tribune and the New York Times lead stories are dog kisses master, fetches sticks wonderfully. Baby love, his first words is daddy, I love you. The prom was perfect. The dancing was divine. Everyone had a good time. No one had illicit sex. And the church is giving grace and comfort to the people of the world. That doesn't sell papers. That's not the lead line on the news. The news is supposed to be about what's the loudest whistle in the room? What's the most outrageous whistle in the room? You want in there 4 rapes in blank community. Be aware. Be on guard. You always you encourage, not encourage. You highlight the bad thing, the interesting thing, the strange thing, and if nothing else, Mr. Trump from day one has proven to be outrageous, over the top, easy to cover, and oh my goodness, no other president could sustain this. Barack Obama hid from the camera, even though he was in an electronic age, and certainly at the kind of cusp president between, how much the social world is influenced by our electronic devices now. But this guy understood it and played it. And so who do you cover? I mean, how do you not cover when he yells at 2 black African-American reporters as you're dumb and you ask dumb questions? Of course that makes the front page. How do you not react when he says, I'm the best president since Lincoln? How do you not react when he says, Joe's got a crooked son, my guys are great? Come on, Susan, this is what, excuse me, your profession has chosen
Yeah.
to do. Now, there are a lot of mea culpas on this. The guy from CNN has just written a book about this, and he's saying mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. For those who are not Catholics, I'm sorry, I'm grievously sorry for what I've done. Um, but I think there was no way to avoid it. Unfortunately, we didn't give the other half. Now, having said that, we never give the other half, do we? I mean,
Do
the
we?
story about the puppies are on page 37, aren't they?
So let me just say, this is where I depart from you. I
So
do
ends a
believe
wonderful romance.
it was a fine romance. The
Yeah.
the newspapers in general, we know that they've been shrinking. We know the business has been shrinking, both
Yeah.
broadcast, video, all of it. It's been under horrific constraints. And what I know is it is so hard to do this job, period. And then you have to do
Yes,
it on top of not having the resources, having a fewer people to cover what's going on. And what's interesting is it is a lot easier to write a negative story, meaning
absolutely.
doing than it is to take the time to nuance it. The beauty of a long form story are things that we know. We know this from social media because we know that people will stop and read good stories. They will stop and linger over this stuff. The quick hits, with that video or whatever that goes viral. Again, they get these big numbers, but people actually, you see the slow creep of these longer stories that outline beautiful things, and people appreciate that quality. I do see that. I think quality does matter. The trouble is there is such a long term payback on that.
Yeah,
It's hard for an industry to say, okay, we're going to stick with this. I'm going to put 5 of these reporters on this for at least a year. We won't have a story until a year, until they get all the nuances worked out and we have the full story there. It's much easier to say, put it up there. Let's get a click. Put it up there. And this again is one of these places where the economics of the business
yeah,
have dictated
yeah.
too much and
You
lost our
know,
way. I think we care about good stuff. I think we as a public want to see good stuff.
we do want to. No, wait. Now, we're not disagreeing here. You're just giving a slightly different angle to the same thing. Because of the, I didn't even bring up the industry's critical financial status, of course. So they got to sell. They got to sell tabloids. They have to sell themselves. They have to sell everything. They're competing now with this internet. Everybody's out there right now. I mean, I think I'm the only person in my whole family doesn't have their own podcast. They're doing podcasts after a while. But I do think they've cut too many corners. And let's be honest, he's so outrageous, so over the top, awful, and funny. How do you not cover that?
Well,
So
I
I
do
do
think
think that everybody,
go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no. I think it's a very complex issue, but I do think the general point is it's not interesting to cover. I mean, how many great stories have you seen about Barack Obama since he's been out of office? Seen some nice stories about Michelle because we're touching her in different ways. And the CNN wonderful thing about First Lady, she should be canonized by that video, okay,
Mhm.
by that show. I do think that the squeaky wheel does get attention. And so it's not that we love Trump or that but how do you avoid Trump? And how do you avoid the fact that this maker and shaker is directing the world?
Well, I do think too, what it demands is it demands a different way of thinking. And when you are
Yeah.
stressed, when the industry is stressed, when it's under economic duress, when it's fighting for its life, they don't have the bandwidth to figure out how to do this in a different
I,
way.
I
And
get
you
it.
can there's always new, there's always, breaking and whatever out there, and we go to back to the same old things. And so I really do think that that time that we said way back in 2016 after the election, 2017, saying, well, we covered him way too much. We gave him too much airtime with the rallies. I think we're back to that. I think he gets
Yeah.
that airtime. It's the streaming time.
Right.
Now, I do want to go back because you said a way back when we departed some discussion, you wanted to make 2 points about Mr. Biden.
Okay. Let me make one other point about Mr. Trump. Don't forget the channels that give him lots of time are not celebrating him, like CNN and CNBC. They're still giving him time, even though they're intellectually crucifying him, even though they're critiquing him. He still gets
Right.
time, and that's a factor. What's the last thing in your mind, right? And that's how his ideas work. If I say the last word, Joe's taking money and Joe's family's taking money from China, Biden looked at him like, what is he talking about? But he got it in, didn't he? He got it
Right.
in that he had done more. So that's really important. All right, I'm going to go back to
Yeah.
Biden.
Okay, I want to do one more
I
thing
think,
before you do that. Can I go back?
yeah,
Which is the Reagan
yes,
presidency. One of the most interesting books was done by a political reporter named Marty Schramm, who ended up
right.
running the Sun Times. And Marty Schramm was assigned to go follow the campaign, but he never was allowed to go out, kind of like he was a COVID person at that point, never allowed to go out outside of his hotel room. He was assigned to watch local television
Ah,
and write out the rates from what people in their living rooms saw. And it was amazing because he, as he said, you would see all of these amazing images of Ronald Reagan at that point, and there would be balloons dropping down, and the images were so powerful. He said it always you could tell that it would distract from what the content was, even at a point
yeah,
where there was highly critical report on his trickle down economics, where it was saying this is what was going to happen, what did happen actually was going, he was predicting the downfall of that type of economic look, and still the campaign loved it because there was Ronald Reagan at a barbecue, shaking
right.
hands, looking like a cowboy, looking healthy. And again, this is what people were seeing on television. So we just have to remember the during
The,
News Literacy Week. Hello, Happy News
yes,
Literacy Week. During News Literacy Week, that what we see is not always what we should just take. We have to be
right,
thinking about what we're getting and
right.
why. So
And this is close to my point on Joe that he didn't speak up when he should have spoken up. But let me just point out that Reagan did that beautifully when Mondale kept bringing up the age, and Reagan totally disarmed that argument. He looked at the camera and says, I'm not going to hold Mr. Mondale accountable to his comments on age. After all, he's young. I forgot the exact quote, and then he made fun of the fact that he was he was the person there rather than the 70-year-old approaching 70 years old. I think Mr. Biden, uh, both in the second non-debate and this debate, tried to be a polished political analyst and a policymaker. And I think he went through steps about what he wanted to do rather than just say, no, you're wrong, or this. He didn't fight him step for step and word for word and wound for wound. He tried to implement a policy, including risking saying that, yes, we're going to have to change how we use oil. We're going to have to change how we do this. And yes, we're going to have to change all that. But I'm going to create jobs in the change. So there will be there'll be real jobs available. So he tried to answer, I think, in regards to policy rather than just politics and punditry. But I think he made a mistake by not fighting back a little bit on the personal items. But after a while, it's nana, nana, nana on both sides. And I think his people were saying, the media is tired of you saying, no, it's not true. No, that's not true. Or fighting back point for point. Make your point. Let people judge. So hence, my ultimate conclusion on this last debate is it was interesting. There were moments of real power in it. There were some moments of clarity, especially from Mr. Biden. And there were moments of clarity from Mr. Trump. That is, that he has no policies, that he is saying, vote for me because I'm me. But I don't think it changed anybody's mind. I think
I was
Trump's base will vote for Trump. Yeah, Trump's base is going to vote for Trump, and Biden's base is going to vote for Biden. I'm hoping, and this is what the Biden camp is hoping, excuse me, I'm trying to be objective here, is that enough people have heard his policies and say, this guy's failed on COVID. I mean, especially COVID. He's just lying about COVID. COVID is not gone. I just talked to my niece who avoided death by the skin of her teeth. COVID is
oh,
not gone.
I'm
And
so sorry.
and then I'm developing a plan, says Mr. Biden, until we get attack COVID. I think that if enough people hear these things, they're going to say, one guy has more policy statements that I'm more comfortable with versus the other guy. And after all, he didn't cause COVID, but it's here.
So let me ask you, do we think the debates that were so powerful and that started on television in 1960, and it took 17 years before there was ever another one, 16 years before there was ever another one, do we think they run their course? Do we think that we are now, the politicians who are running for office know how to manipulate the television and the broadcast medium so easily that it doesn't give us, the voters, the information that
Well,
we need?
well, if you consider the second debate really just a policy statement by both of them, okay, um,
Mhm.
then what did we learn in either debate? What was new? Joe did talk about Joe Biden did, forgive me as if I know him personally. Joe Biden did talk about his what he's willing to do with the oil. But what was really
Mhm.
new? And I think the new media, the new availability, the new constant availability of the candidates, I think diminishes the importance and the power of the debate. When Kennedy and Nixon met there, that was a confrontation between two political giants, or one,
Right.
two established political operatives rather than
Right.
giants. They're giants now, they weren't then. I don't think these debates have the same poignancy and the same impact that they did. I mean, said that,
Mhm.
maybe they should all do 3 of those infomercial hours. Hi, I'm Al Gini and I'm running for senator. And here are the 10 virtues that I think are important for senatorial work. And let me go through them.
Right.
Thank you very much for your attention. Good night. So
Yeah.
I think that we're saturated, and the debates may become redundant, and in fact, may wind up hurting either candidate because of the pressure to perform.
Yeah. Well, Al, we are not done with you yet.
Mm,
We're not breaking up totally.
okay,
In
good.
fact, we're hoping very much to have not only Al, but his partner in crime, Abraham Singer, talk with us about The Sanity of Satire, which is a brand new book,
Brand
and
new.
surviving politics one joke at a time. We're hoping to have a public program in next week before the election. Watch this space. We're going to put notices out, and I think it's going to be really wonderful. And I think at this point, talking about the laughter behind politics and the jokes on politics will be a wonderful, wonderful anecdote to what's going on in reality. LG, thank you so very much for being with us today, and I'm happy half hour to you, sir.
It's always a pleasure, and I really do look forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye to all of you. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you soon.